All right, I got to do a proper intro on this one
Yeah.
because it's a real throwback. Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the Weightlifting House podcast with your host, Seb Ostovich, the voice of the people, joined, I don't even know if I could say of course anymore, joined thankfully, gratefully, fortunately by the people scientist, Joshua Gibson. Josh, my man. It's been a long time since we've done a main show. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. And I feel like we're so used to just letting our hair down for
Right.
the morning brew that you open the show, just immediately start talking trash
Right.
and just kind of exchanging banter instead of being professional as you are on the main show and delivering a quality product as always.
We'll see. Yeah. Oh, well, this is going to be in the season one of the return of the Weightlifting House podcast. But like you say, we've just been cranking out morning brews, answering people's questions, but basically just talking shit. And if this was a morning brew, I'd have probably insulted your facial hair a good 2 times at this point.
Yeah.
As I say that, even you're stroking it. But Josh,
I'm proud of it.
I know you are. I know you are. Oh, I went to so this is already so off topic. I went to the hairdressers. I needed to get shaped up nicely for Worlds. Because, at the time of people listening to this, we are 2 days away from flying to Worlds. Supposedly Worlds was cancelled and then suddenly it wasn't. To be honest, at this point, when you're listening, it could have been cancelled again. I don't know, but we think we're going to Worlds. But I needed to make sure I looked all right. And then realized the whole time while I'm there, I'm going to have a mask on anyway. But they chopped my hair and then they were like, do you want your beard done? And I was like, I mean, I don't really know what that means, but let's do it. And it cost a lot extra, which they didn't tell me until it got done. But getting my sort of like facial hair all done was a experience, Josh, I'll tell you that much.
Was it?
Oh, yeah. Like, I don't know if you can see here, like just the line is so sharp. But the problem is like, it can't stay. Like I can't maintain that. Right. So it's just made me realize how good I can look. And then everything is going to be a deviation in the negative away from that over the coming weeks and months. So, there's that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing I tell people when they pursue like a new endeavor, be it, anything in life. It's like if you outdo yourself the very first time around, it's going to be so hard to match that. And you look so damn good right now. Yeah. I should just take this in because I'll probably never see it again.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Who knows? Maybe I'll start making this a monthly thing. But
when you're probably going to start making so much money that you'll pay people to manage every part of your body.
Am I? Yeah. Am I going to be making so much money? When is that going to happen? I would like that to happen soon, please. To be fair, when me and you first started doing podcasts and stuff, which was how long? Well, yesterday was the 5-year anniversary from when I first flew out to Kansas to meet Glenn, which is such a throwback. I can't believe how much has happened in half a decade.
That's a short span of time. It's actually not that long.
Yeah, it's not that long, and it also is. But
it also is, yeah.
Yeah, it's that whole thing of everybody overestimates how much they can accomplish in a day, but underestimates how much they can accomplish in a year. So true. Never does a day go by where I think I got enough done. But at the end of the year, you're like, well, kind of move the needle a bit.
Right.
But when did we first? Was it
2017 or 2018?
So it could have been 17. So I started the podcast in April. Did you then come on like 4 months later in the September, or was it a year and 4 months?
That's a great question.
It is, yeah.
I actually don't know. It might have been a year.
I think it was a year. I think it was you started
year.
Joining me properly a year and a half later.
Yeah.
But we'd done a few episodes sporadically.
Right.
But the reason I bring that up was you said about getting rich, which certainly is not yet the case. But compared to where we began, where we were just impoverished weightlifting junkies who would literally do anything for a fix of weightlifting, and the idea of making an extra $50 a month was like the difference between eating steak. Well, no, it was the difference between being able to afford to get gas for the car to even get to the gym versus walking, I guess. So things have changed for us, I guess, over the last few years, but it's been a goddamn journey.
Well, and you mentioned kind of off air that you wanted to talk about plans for 2022.
Briefly, I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, so I think maybe a cool little approach to that is to talk about 2021 and not just, I think people are always interested in saying like, hey, what's Weightlifting House going to do? What are they developing? Like the actual like physical stuff. I'd like to hear more so lessons learned. So things that are actually applicable to people listening who have aspirations, things they're working on, things they're trying to do and do well, or if they start, something new given the new year. What from 2021 would you kind of take with you as lessons learned?
For me, 2021 was the year of the systems and processes. That's what it was. It was like, in toward the end of 2020, sales started picking up. We became a little bit better known, and we realized that what we were doing wasn't scalable. Like if we had 10 orders in a day, no, let's say we had 5 orders in a day. If it went up to 20, things would go wrong. It wasn't like we had a process that could just scale. And so by the end of 2020, things were a bit crazy. Like we were slow on things, we were late on things. We're having a lot of problems with, COVID, delaying products and all that sort of things. Last year was the year of let's rent some premises, nice and big. Let's find some software that we can use that helps us automate emails and customer service and shipping labels and all of these things, checklists, and let's make sure that we're like regimented on all of these things so that if we go from 20 orders a day to 100, nothing is going to break down. The only thing we need is like maybe someone who's full-time on packing and shipping.
Right.
Like that, you know what I mean? So like we put that stuff in place. So I think that's mainly what it was. This year is or 2022 is going to be hopefully a lot more expanding the product range side of things. But then that's another lesson learned, which I think people always underestimate. Things take, I would say, minimum 3 times longer to do the first time doing them. So like when you're wanting to bring out a new product and you think, okay, I'll talk with the manufacturer for a month, we'll get it right. They'll send it to us, we'll test it, we'll get it back to them a couple of weeks later. We'll go into production. That might take 6 weeks and then 4 weeks shipping. Okay, let's say 3 months and we can have this product done. That's not coming out till 9 months earliest. Like the amount of stuff that you have to go through, it's never what you want it to be first time. You've got to test it, reiterate it. So yeah, that's definitely a lesson I learned, was that things are slower than you want them to be. They're always slower than you want them to be.
Well, and people who go through the Weightlifting House podcast, the early episodes, and they listen to you talk about coming out with knee sleeves.
Oh my gosh.
You probably didn't realize at that moment how difficult it would be.
I was just looking around to see if I have the latest pair of knee sleeves. We got the latest pair sent to us earlier this week. So it was awesome. Right at the end of November, early December, they came back. They're really nice.
Yeah. Any like specs you can give us?
No, I can't really, other than the fact that the biggest problem was that as nice as they are, it said size L, and I couldn't get it past my calf. So we've got some sizing problems to do.
Right.
It's like, maybe, I don't know why it says L. At first I thought maybe it says L for left, but the other one said L as well. So I was like, either they've sent me 2 lefts or this is a large and we've got a sizing problem. So like that sort of thing where if we were just like, okay, they're great, let's make them. And then suddenly everyone orders them and then everybody has to return them. And then your margins are just shot, your profit margins, and then you make no money on it, and it kind of sucks. So we've got more iterations to go through and that sort of thing. I guess that's another thing actually, is like margins. Like most people don't worry about that stuff. You probably do a bit now that you're doing some of the merch stuff, which you're not wearing today, which is a shame. I've been wearing your t-shirt a lot. What is it? Retired Hot Girl. Oh, that is. Wait, is that yours or is
no?
I just see you in your
Etsy.
Oh, I just see in your athletes wearing Retired Hot Girl. I do like that. I would wear that, to be fair. But yeah, I look at a lot of what like Cal Strength, or even people like Seeker Strength. And I was talking to Owen about this yesterday. He said to me on Black Friday, Seb, do you do the Black Friday stuff? I was like, yeah. And he was like, do you think we should? I was like, dude, you have 100% margins, basically. Like your overheads are low. If you sell a product for $30 because it's a program, you keep $30.
Right.
It's like if you sell a t-shirt for $30, you do not keep $30. You keep a lot less than that.
Right.
Like if you're lucky, you might keep half in total and that sort of stuff. So like I was like, dude, you can like drop 30% off and still make a killing and triple your sales or quadruple or quintuple your sales for the day. Whereas obviously like we could do the same in terms of quintupling sales for a day, or it was more like 10x in sales for a few days, which is great. But like if you're working off, say, a 50% margin, and then you cut 30% off, suddenly you've got a 20% margin, and then you'd have to sell 2.5 times the product just to make the same amount of profit anyway. So like all those, so looking into 2022 is definitely year of expansion and year of the margin.
Yeah. Well,
we need some 100% profit margin products.
Well, is it just continuing to do those things, right? Continuing to develop the processes and systems, and you already have established, like, so knowing what you've learned, is it then just reiterating or iterating and reinforcing kind of what you've developed or started to develop? Like how is that informing 2022?
Yeah, it's completing the product range on the wearable accessories. That's kind of how I like to say it. Like, so not committing to doing squat racks, even plates, that was a lot harder logistically than we recognize. Like I definitely can guarantee that we're going to have plates next year, but like everything that's wearable, like sleeves, wraps, belts, straps, tights, singlets, like the wearable accessory side of weightlifting, I want to have something in every category. I'm not going to I can't say that we'd have like 3 different colors of wrist straps or something like that, but we'll at least have wrist straps, or we'll at least have a singlet or knee sleeves, but we might not have 5 different colors and 5 different styles. But so we're adding sort of width to everything. And then over the years after that, I guess we'll add depth in terms of types of knee sleeves and colors of types of knee sleeves and that sort of thing. And then definitely the sort of 100% margin products, which tend to be basically the electronic products, we're definitely looking to thicken that out, like both with educational ebook style content, which I think we're perfect quite well to do. And I actually want to talk to you about it again, because I sort of recognize that you're not in a situation where you could write a 100,000 word book, but you might be in a situation where you could write a 10,000 word deep dive into a topic that would be useful for people.
Right.
And then we've got a product or a project outside of that, which would hopefully be our biggest thing and sort of revolutionize what we do. And to some degree revolutionize what weightlifting does as a sport, but we're not ready to announce that yet. You basically guessed it last week. I wish, it might even be that it's currently advertising on this podcast at the start. Hopefully it will be. But if we can get that, if we can nail that, then I think we're going to be in a really exciting place for next year, where we can do a lot more fun media stuff. Because really, like, the whole point of it is to do better media,
right?
To send multiple teams out to different countries to film. And to do that, you just need a lot of exposable income. So you've got to sell enough stuff to be able to get that. So that's really the reason we do it.
I think there are a lot of good points there. And one thing that I kind of take away from that is, one, allowing Weightlifting House, like me thinking as a consumer, allowing Weightlifting House some room to breathe in terms of kind of variability and products and quality and how things operate. Because again, like you said, you have systems in place for a certain amount of work, and as soon as you exceed that, it's like, okay, we need to reiterate what we're doing, and we need to develop better systems. And that's not a clean process, right? It's kind of messy. And I think sometimes as a consumer, it's easy to kind of zero in on one experience and to say like, well, this is representative of the whole, this is representative of the brand. But instead it's saying, okay, they're growing. You're trying. If I were learning, how to snatch, I wouldn't expect to be perfect from day one, and I wouldn't expect myself to look like I do now in 1,000 days. So there's obviously this refinement that has to happen. That's across the board in everything. So I think 100%. Just recognizing that's important.
Yeah, like, even that's what we kind of realized with the plates. And even to some degree, like in the USA right now, with our small products, we're set up nicely with a fulfillment center that can deal with everything quickly, next day delivery, that sort of stuff. But like with bars, we're renting in a warehouse, and then Michael goes over and helps ship stuff. And we were like, our inventory management, we were like, okay, I think, can you confirm how many 20 kilo bars we have left for Black Friday? And Michael was like, I can confirm that there are none. And we were like, okay, kind of feel like there should be some based on our sales, but like, I can't fly over there and check. And then the week after Black Friday, it's like, oh, actually, there are some 20 kilo bars. It's like, oh, okay. Like, and the thing is, that's not his fault because,
right.
he's just helping us out basically. So, that sort of stuff, like you've got to have a system in place before you start doing that sort of thing. But we'll get there. I mean,
Yeah.
you probably, I mean, the level of responsibility that you have now compared to when we started has grown a lot. Like, not only do you have more athletes online, but you have significantly more athletes in person. You're actually in a gym where you're technically the coach rather than just being at that old gym with the brick walls where you turn up with people and train. Like, you must have experienced some of this over the last year of like having to systematize things a bit.
It's the exact same thing. Like I was literally just designing, kind of took like a base template and kind of just prettied it up and built it out just for like planning a macro cycle. Basically, it's like, what do training blocks look like? How's the progression organized? And again, it's not because this stuff doesn't like exist. It's kind of like, you guys had the same equipment, you had the same bars. It's like, but how do we sell 1,000 or how do we manage 1,000 instead of just 10? It's like the quality of the product relatively the same. So I think with the system itself, and what I've noticed is it's developing a way to organize and to view everything just quicker. And that's kind of the big thing, is being able to see it quickly, because I can pull out programs and workouts and talk people through technique, but when you have 20 people in a club and they're all of varying skill levels and they're all of varying kind of like expertise when it comes to not only the lifts, but being in a team setting with other weightlifters and with other people who need to like share space and equipment, and kind of taking into consideration just like the overarching feature of being a part of a team. It's not, you can't operate like really, really personally with everyone. You have to have things kind of structured and in place to be able to execute quickly and without too much kind of like friction. Otherwise, you're kind of like paralyzed by thinking, well, what should this person do? What's the progression? And it's like, okay, you need to have that out. You need to be able to easily see it. And Derek Evely, I was actually listening to a podcast he did on long-term athletic development. And he mentioned just really having like a 1-page kind of summary of his approach so that he could easily view it and pull up that page and say, okay, where are we at? What do we need to do? And that's kind of how I think through a few things. Like I have a couple kids I work with, and it's like, I know we probably need to do some sort of squatting or lower body exercise, some sort of pressing or upper body exercise, and some sort of pulling. That's like a framework we always operate within. We do some general physical preparedness work before as a warm-up. If that's jumping, if it's like running, change of direction stuff. So having that like framework in place to say, okay, I just need exercises, I don't need a structure, I think helps expedite the process. So
especially with those early people, you don't need 10 pages of bullet pointed notes. It's like you can probably write out your process of coaching youth lifters in a paragraph, and as long as you stay within that, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the reason that's important, like the flexibility, and not like, because I could build out an entire program for someone, but the problem is when you have a rank beginner, a youth, or someone who's like really sensitive to training, it changes so fast. Like, how can you be adaptable if you've planned out 14 weeks? So you have to like be able to also kind of connect those dots of, here's someone who's well established, been training for a long time, is like relatively resistant to training, so needs just like a lot of consistent work applied over time, versus here's someone highly sensitive, new, really raw. That's going to change quick, and you have to be able to adapt to that. So like understanding where you put those resources and like all of this like work that happened on the back end, it's where you organizing that stuff and where you allocating that to, and then saying, okay, well, I can be flexible and adaptable in these situations, I can be less flexible, less adaptable in these other situations. Because again, it's just like time allocation, and then knowing what you have to give on any given day, and then kind of making that work.
Do you have like a it sounds like such a cheesy thing, but it genuinely is useful, I think, in just helping you make decisions. Do you have like a motto or a governing line of something, and then of what you're trying to achieve in life. And then if you don't know whether to do something, you can ask yourself, does it help me achieve that? And if the answer is yes, and you do it, and if the answer is no, you don't.
Yeah, I have it. So I don't think it's as much with like the choosing what to involve myself with and what not to involve myself with, but I do have kind of like values that I come back to that help me drive kind of like how I react, and then also how I operate. So like when I'm when I'm in the middle of a situation, something happens, I think, okay, what's my ultimate like goal? What do I want to do? Why am I doing this? And then is this in line with that in terms of just how I, communicate with someone, or like you said, I mean, even the way like the business itself operates. So it's like, okay, if this is a shitty product, is it shitty because I just don't care? Or is it shitty because I haven't put time into it? Like, does it need to be great? That's kind of the same thing. I imagine it's the same thing with you. It's like, are you going to try to make the best, item or whatever that costs like $10, or are you going to make sure that like the really high price, really valuable stuff comes out top notch?
Yeah.
You can get more variability with like, clothing, or you kind of testing out brands, testing out styles, testing out fabrics. That's fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. But like if you're selling something for, $5,000, you're not just going to kind of slap something together with some duct tape and say, here you go. So it's kind of the same idea with me. It's, is this situation, meaningful? Okay, let me run it through my values, which ultimately I could tell people listening, it's to help people, to help athletes, to help them improve and become better weightlifters, and then also use those skills to become better people. It's to help them realize their greatness, so like realize their potential. And that's kind of like the whole weightlifting thing. It's like, okay, you're in here to become a better weightlifter. How do we do that? Like, how do we get more weight on the bar? How do we make the technique more, like, how do we master the technique? And then ultimately the last one, just as kind of like a result of helping someone improve, it's to be inspired by the improvements, to be inspired by the performance, and to make it happen again. So it's kind of like this triangle where kind of each thing feeds into the next. And that's kind of how I've started to operate. And I was actually talking to Justin Holly, and he mentioned this idea of what's seen can't be unseen. And it's kind of this concept of pareidolia, which is just seeing a pattern, where it doesn't exist, but not being able to unsee the pattern once you've seen it. So if I use the example of, if you look up in the clouds and you say, well, that looks like an elephant. Like, there's no elephant in the clouds. You're just kind of registering this like broad kind of like
gross shape.
Exactly. You're registering a gross shape and placing something on top of that. So when I list out these values, it's not just for other people, but it's so that I can't unsee them, and then I have to operate by them. And again, it comes back to that idea of there's going to be more variability at the start, and then ideally over time you get less. So using them as like guiding ideas, I think, is important. So that's kind of where I'm at.
It's interesting because I was talking to Tina Ball at the last Coaches Only, and I think I might have a podcast with her soon. She's, for those who don't know, she's a coach of David Leety, the strongest weightlifter in the Oceanic region. And she was doing her talk all about relationship building with the athletes, buying in, or gaining trust, buy-in, all of these sorts of things. And she said that she just makes it very clear, like, it's not just what her sort of values are and morals are. It's like, what is the gym value? What is the culture that the gym wants to have? And it's very clear, and everybody knows it. They get taught it when they come in. Everybody who's already there is living out those values and habits and customs of, if every time you enter the gym, you go around and you shake everybody's hand and you say hello. That's just something that you have to do. And so people buy into that, and they start recognizing how good it is. And then if somebody comes in and they don't fit, Tina doesn't have to question to herself, okay, am I going to let this person stay around? It's like, they violated the culture. The other athletes know that they violated it. I can't maintain this like idea of this is how the gym is if I'm going to let this one person get away with it. So I have no choice, and then the person can't stay. And then it just means that like not only are you creating these values, you're allowing other people to buy into them because they see the merit and they see the value in promoting these values for, you know, not only their sake, but their teammates' sake and the coach's sake and the gym's sake. It's quite a nice system to have, but it's not easy to do because, you know, and you and I had this conversation a long time ago with Dave Spitz about, you know, at Cal Strength, how he did it. And he was in that somewhat fortunate position where he's able to say to an athlete, yeah, you don't fit in here, go away. But we were at a point, I mean, I wasn't coaching as much then, but you certainly were trying to build up your coaching game, where it was like the idea of turning down a paying athlete is like crazy. But for the sake of the most important thing, which is culture, you kind of have to do it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you have my sort of watching you, what I'm seeing is that you have softened up a bit, I think.
Yeah.
You used to be way more like, if you don't want to be a 150, 180 guy or a 100, 120 girl, get the fuck out of the gym. I just don't want to talk to you. And now you seem way more like, oh, I quite like having fun with my athletes. I make sure they train hard, but like I care about them and their life goals and what they're doing. You know, they don't have to go and compete internationally. Like I'd like them to try and get to the national level, but really I just want to, like you said, feel inspired by their progress and wins. And that's kind of your current goal. Maybe you still have the desire of like, I want to produce an Olympic champion, but I see it less. I see it more that you're just interested in becoming the best coach that you can be in terms of what you know about coaching and programming, but then also not inflicting that on your athletes and just making sure that they enjoy and love what they do.
Yeah, and those things I think are very compatible too, right? So to ultimately to realize someone's potential, right? What they can do in the long run, which we've agreed about before many times on podcasts. You have to be able to keep them training. Like criteria number one is they exist in a gym.
Yeah. For a long period of time.
So
that's actually the first thing you've got to figure out.
It is. So I actually got a t-shirt from Tyler of Rubber City Weightlifting. So shout out to them. Shout out to Dan Bell. And it says Rubber City Weightlifting on the back at the top. It says the secret. It says show up. Number one, train hard. Number two, number three, repeat for 10 years.
Yeah.
So the secret in 3 steps, that's what it is. Basically, the idea is that in order for someone to realize their potential, they have to, you know, exist within a gym. They have to be able to train over time, and they have to be able to do the appropriate or proper amount of training and like the right program.
Yeah.
So for me, that kind of starts with just getting people wanting to be at the gym, right? Mm-hmm. And I think when a lot of people start out, it's more rigid, it's more black and white, and that's just because a lot of people start out with the X's and O's and kind of like backfill with the coach athlete stuff, like the soft skills or the social science of it. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the same way for me. So as you pick up that like physiology, biomechanics stuff, you get less and less change in that as you've established more of a foundation, because again, things can't change quickly over time. Just as humans adapt slowly, you know, science kind of changes slowly, just due to the nature of the process. And once you've established a foundation, you can make adjustments. But like, you know, it's funny because if you talk to any well-established coaches, it's like, what's the most revolutionary thing about technique that you've changed? They're like, well, you know, I stay slightly more midfoot than I used to. And it's like that slight change is maybe like what you could quantify it down to like a half inch. It's not actually a big difference. So you get to like tighter and tighter bandwidths of change. That's kind of where I'm at with like the technical side of things, kind of the programming side of things. I'm just working on like understanding manipulating volume over time a bit better.
Can I just jump in quickly before you go on that? Because that's really interesting. What you're saying is like, you're so right, because there have been points for me where someone says, what's the biggest change you're making at the moment? I'd be like, it's to do with the function of the arms after the contact, or like it's to do with bringing the weight, the center of mass slightly more towards the midfoot from the heel when you're at the knee. And it's like, okay, that's a big thing that you think you're doing. What is the difference that's made to the team that you coach? Like, are you seeing national records now? Are you seeing people qualify now because of that? Are you seeing people lift more because of that? It's like probably almost none of those things. Maybe it just it allows me to feel like I have a better understanding of a good technical model.
Right.
But it's not going to make as big a change as if you say to everybody, oh, by the way, if you don't turn up at 5:30, you've got to do you got to do 20 burpees.
Right.
And like, as dumb as that sounds, suddenly everyone turns up at 5:30, and then the knock-on effect of that is that, everybody gets to warm up together and chat about how was your day, how the kids doing, how's your boss, what do you want to do today? And suddenly everyone's in a better mood, and then they train better and they perform better. And then that's going to move the needle much more than you thinking as a coach a little bit more about where the balance of the foot is. Like, there are those two aspects of coaching. And I think, like, temperamentally, you're naturally more of the thinking and understanding and logic. And yet you've, through your conversations with various people, Justin, Ollie being one of them, I guess, you've come to appreciate more of the artistic, atmospheric, to be honest, Glenn Pendlay-esque side of coaching. It always goes back to Glenn.
It does. It was. And what's funny is, Justin kind of got his start off of Donnie coming over and establishing a relationship with Donnie, and Donnie got to start kind of working with Glenn. So again, it's like this kind of trickle down from the top. And I think a lot of people see, and I remember being with Glenn in the back room at the Arnold, and someone came up to him, a coach, it was in the A session, a coach came up to him and said, Glenn, you're one of my biggest influences. Like, your work at Cal Strength got me into weightlifting and kept me in. And kind of saying that, I was like, yeah, man, Glenn has had such a tremendous impact that even if, when you think about it, you don't think about it as fully, as it exists. So I think that's an important
and it's
point.
not his programming. His programming was
programming
great.
is so simple.
Yeah. And I wrote that book, and I'm always blown away by how many people buy the book, because they're not buying it because I wrote it. They're buying it because they're actually interested in Glenn's programming.
Right.
And the truth is, like, the book is way more interesting than the programming, because it basically starts at what are Glenn's core values?
Right. What
are his political beliefs? All of these things about what shaped him, and then how that turned into a program, and all these life experiences of this happened at this gym in this state, that happened in another, and that made me tweak this. And then you end up with a program, and it's like, okay, cool, that program now feels way richer and interesting because I understand how he got there. But it wasn't the programming, really. It was just the fact that, like, he said, I believe in you. And then not only just said it, he then went to prove it. You can stay with me because you can't afford a flat. I'll make sure you have food. I'll even give you money to try and, be able to eat even more than you were going to eat. And then you're like, wow, he believes in me. I've got this team of other people who they all believe in everyone so much. That's why we're going to do well. Rather than just, 3 sets of 5 versus 4 sets of 5. It's like, or 5 sets of 5. It's like, it probably didn't matter that much, that side of things.
Yeah. I wish Glenn would have encapsulated his values and delivered them a little better. Because I think, for him, he kind of wore it on his sleeves. It was like, that was Glenn. He kind of permeated his values. But I think, like, being able to distill them down and not like brand yourself off of them, but just make them like kind of that idea of, what's seen can't be unseen. Just have them exist in a physical space. I think would be important, not only for Glenn, but also for everyone else to say, okay, this is the expectation. And it's not the expectation because I've heard Glenn talk about it kind of like vaguely, or I've heard other people talk about it vaguely, because that creates like this, this almost like this story, or this kind of like magical idea of what it is, or what it could have been. Instead, coming back to, I think everyone has values. They probably listed out. If you were in any organized sports team, they probably talked about values, had them listed on the wall. But I've kind of developed some, and they're all like pretty similar, because at the heart of it, you need the same things, and you can't deviate. It's like training, right? You need intensity. You have a certain percentage of 1RM, if we define intensity that way. You have volume, which you could define like sets, reps, load, and then you have the technical variation, right? And then you have like things within that, so like density, which would be like the amount of work in a singular unit of time. You have frequency, you have all these other things you can manipulate, exercise, but like they exist under very, very broad concepts. So the same idea here is like, if my values are like awareness, presence, and action, right? So kind of similar to Justin's. It's not because, well, they sound similar and I like them. It's because, you have to be aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. You have to be present. You have to be in the gym, right? And you have to be like present with what you're doing to kind of get the best result and to get any result. And then you have to have some sort of action that comes from that. So it's like very, very foundational aspects of these things that we talk about.
Are those yours? Did you say, or are they Justin's?
Yeah.
Those
No, they're mine. Yeah. His are intent, purpose, and deed.
Yeah. He did a talk for us on that at the first Coaches Only.
Yeah. Which is great, by the way.
Yeah.
Coaches Only is a fantastic resource, which is why Justin got the exposure he did in the first place, I think. And coming on my podcast, the Philosophical Weightlifting Podcast, that also helped.
Number one podcast in the world.
Yeah. I wish.
It's good.
But yeah, it's good. But yeah, so we talk about these ideas and they kind of exist outside of just us all putting them down and saying, well, we all have similar values. These are things that we kind of stumbled upon. They like evolve independently. And then I think even the more important point is that we all know what we want. We just haven't put words to it. So
yeah,
like what I always knew as a coach, and this comes back to my question I asked you, like, what'd you learn in 2021? It's kind of what I learned is that I always knew how I wanted people to operate. I always knew what I would want someone to do who wanted to be better at weightlifting. It's like, okay, I want you to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. I want you to show up. I want you to be involved. I want you to support your teammates. I want you to treat it like a team, even though it's an individual sport. And then I want to see that manifest itself in action. See you change your technique, see you work on what you're doing deliberately and work to refine your craft. I never said that. And I would just imply it. And this is coming back to that concept of like, Glenn had these values people had to read, but they didn't exist kind of in like an isolated fashion like this. And instead there's like this air of mystery, and you never want an air of mystery because then that's where confusion exists. It exists in this space where there's nothing like concrete. So I think just putting that stuff down onto paper and having it listed, now I can say, hey, these are the values. This is very specific. And if you're not doing these things, you're not existing in the space of where the values exist. Instead of just like, well, you didn't show up to training. That's terrible. It's like, well, why is it terrible? It's like, well, my core value is that you show up to training and you're part of the team environment. So now you're going directly against that.
I think, the writing of it down, like, I spent probably somewhere between 8 to 10 hours last week, just without a laptop, without internet, going through a few exercises for the following year, basically starting as broad as what are the 4 values? What's like the overarching goal?
What are they?
So I got a few. So passion, and these are sort of like Weightlifting House values. Everybody who works here has to have passion for the sport. Right. When we're looking for a video editor, I don't just want someone who's a sick editor. I'd rather have someone who's passionate about weightlifting, who knows how to edit a bit and then is going to be interested in learning more, just because that's good for the company as a whole. Quality, because I think that's something that I've allowed to fall short, but I want people to always think with the education that we do, with the content, with the products, that it's of high quality. And then another is growth, because it's just something in me that I just can't get rid of. And it does, but I left it somewhat vague. It's not like profitable, or it's not like financial this, or it's like, it's open to so many things. Like because there is a limit on how big I want the company to get to. And if we hit those goals, then there are other ways to grow. You can grow personally, you can grow in the quality, again, of the content that you're doing. You can grow in how many people you reach, all these different metrics of doing that. And then the motto, you've heard it, everyone's heard it, Weightlifting House brings the sport of weightlifting closer to its fans, athletes and coaches. Athletes and coaches have been added in 2021 as we realized we needed to define a little better than just fans. And then you basically go for a 10-year goal, and you talk about all the things that you want in this big goal that is, and it's a stretch goal. It's not like conservatively I want this. It's like, this is absolutely what I want. And then you go 3-year goal. 3 years, you can start to see a little bit better because you remember the last 3 years and you can remember what's sort of achievable. And you go, okay, that's 3 years. What are the things that would have to happen to do that? What would the revenue look like? What would the things that you're doing look like? All these sorts of things. And then you go 1 year. What are those? And then eventually you go 90 days. What are the things, the 5 things that if only those things happened in the next 90 days, the first quarter, would make you ecstatic? You write those down, and then you say who in the team, and we've got 4 of us here, and we've got 2 sort of outside of this who aren't here in the UK. Who is accountable for that? So it doesn't mean they're responsible for getting everything done, but who is the person who, if that one thing, so here's an example. One of them is, I want to put on a coaches only and I want to sell 150 tickets. So who's accountable for that? It doesn't mean that person is entirely responsible for everything, but if that doesn't happen, who can we talk to, not get angry at? We just go, what happened there? Why wasn't that able to work? What were the problems that you faced? And then within that one task, you work out who are the people who are responsible for various things. So like, to sell 150 tickets, what needs to happen? Well, the answer is we've got to have a certain quality of coaches turning up to speak that we've never had before. So what I want to do there is, I want to go broader. I want to go abroad, basically. I want to get head coaches from other countries to come and talk. I think that's a way to do it. So I might be responsible for that thing. But at the end, the other thing would be, who's going to be responsible for creating all the promotional stuff? Who's going to be responsible for reaching out to member federations to see if they want to advertise this to their coaches? So that could be 3 points. 3 different people are responsible for those, but one person is accountable for it, and they have to check on each person. Are you getting these things done? And all those sorts of things. And then nailing that down into 5 things that have to get done by the end of this first quarter, knowing who's accountable, knowing who's responsible. It's so eye-opening, getting these things out on paper.
Right.
I even did a bit of a stop, start, continue thing. Like, looking back at the last year, what do we need to stop doing? What do we need to continue doing? What do we need to start doing?
Interesting.
And it's funny because I was thinking when you were talking about, these values that people have that aren't written down, and we operate under them, but actually forcing ourselves to sit down to some degree, like I did last week, without any outside stimulus and just think on your own, you really get somewhere. Like, it's amazing. I heard something on the Tim Ferriss podcast where it was like, you keep asking someone why, and they offer up statements. Why do you do Weightlifting House? I love weightlifting. Why do you love weightlifting? I like the feeling of getting better. Why do you like the feeling of getting better? And you keep going like this, and then eventually you say because, and you provide what is ultimately the baseline. And the because might be, for me, it might be something like, so why do you like getting better? And then the answer is, because I felt like I never tried. I never tried as hard as I could have done when I was younger. Why? And you keep going. And then ultimately it's, I was nervous to put myself out there in front of people. And you end up with this because, and you realize that is the thing that is like defining everything that you do. And just understanding that can be so useful. Like, asking yourself why, you give an answer, why, give an answer, why, give an answer, because, and you go, okay, these are the guiding things. And then you can allow those to become principles for you in what you do.
I mean, if people aren't writing this stuff down, that was like some of the best podcasting I think you've ever done.
Did you know you used to hype me up so much when we, in the early days of doing podcasts together, and I would just I would talk, probably stuff that people had heard before, but maybe you hadn't or whatever, and you'd be like, damn, I hope everyone wrote that down. I'd be like, I was like, hell yeah.
Well, and it's the reason I even say that is because, so I have a buddy, his name's Tom Newton. Shout out to him.
Shout out to Tom.
And he works for a startup called eFuse, which is like a online platform. It's kind of like a social media platform for gaming where people can keep track of their stats and interact with other people and see job opportunities and stuff. It's not a plug. I'm just trying to explain kind of what I'm getting to, but
use code Josh.
Code Josh at checkout. But he works for eFuse, and we have conversations like this every night. Like, every time I see him, it ends up coming back to like, what are we trying to do? And then how can we do that better? Like, how can we improve on it? And he was talking about when when he has to like let go of someone, or someone quits or someone leaves, he's like, what are the questions we ask? So like, where were we short and unable to deliver, or to be able to like ask the right questions, or provide the right support, right? So it's always coming back to these concepts of developing the abilities to develop people, and then understanding like what's important and what's not. And you kind of just mentioned a lot of that, which is what I've been focusing on. And actually, I wasn't really going to mention it, but now that we're talking about this stuff specifically, I reached out to Justin, I think like a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago at this point, because I realized that he does like coaching mentorships. I was like, hey, Justin, what would it take to be involved with that? And it was a pretty seamless transition. So we've been doing calls every other week, and we'll chat for like 2 hours just about coaching, and he'll kind of take me through a lot of these exercises and ideas. And for me, it stemmed from a dissatisfaction with how I was approaching the coaching process in the gym. It's like, okay, something happens. How do you respond to it? Okay, what's the outcome of that response? Is that what you want, or is it what you wouldn't want? And it's like, I don't want that. I don't think it's helpful. So it's like, okay, well, how do you change it? It's like, well, you try to understand what you should do instead of what you shouldn't do, because we all know what we shouldn't do, but it's like, okay, how do we avoid making that mistake? How do we avoid those pitfalls? So it's just being more active and seeking out like the best way to approach developing a team, a culture, and then people. And so I thought Justin does a great job of that. And he's really the only person I've heard talk about that stuff extensively. Everyone else talks about the sets and reps, which I love, but when it gets like the culture thing, it's like either too like constructed, or too like simple and basic and obvious, or they don't talk about it at all. So I think Ray Jones probably does a good job of this. I wish I could have a chat with him about how he develops people. But yeah, so that's why I reached out to Justin, and it's to talk about these same topics.
It is interesting that, because you're not looking for a coach to help you work out how to program, because like Lord knows you know how to program. Like you understand what's going on. You're as up to date as anyone out there is. But having somebody to help guide you on the things outside of that. It's funny because, dude, you and I are doing the same thing. Like the reason I went through that process was because started working with a business coach, because I was awesome. A little bit of dissatisfaction with the lack of direction for the company and all that sort of stuff. And then they give you these things, and it's not like they're coming and going, you should do this product. It's like, dude, I know what product to do. Like, what what set of squats to do. But it's like having someone who goes, have you considered trying to work out your values? Have you considered trying to structure, your goals? And it's like, wow, this is so useful when you start talking to someone like that. Like with me, with someone, and you with Justin. It's amazing what the way I think about it is taking time out from working in the business, or you working in coaching, to working on the business or working on coaching. Like you can't just be in coaching all the time. You've got to be working on coaching. Yeah. And I got to be working on the business. I can't be in the business all the time. Find the emails. I've got to be at the helm, looking out, looking at the icebergs. I don't want to pull a Titanic, you know what I mean? And just thinking, okay, where do we need to navigate to while someone else can work in the business? And you need to do the same. It's like, you can't just keep turning up to the gym, working minute by minute. You've not got enough hours in the week. Oh crap, I've got a program. I don't have time to work on other stuff. It's like, you got to put time out and go, I'm not in the business anymore. I'm on it. I'm looking on Josh Phil WL as a coaching business. What do I need to do to make that package better? And it's not read a program, and it's not, read another article. It's understand what I'm trying to do, understand why I want to do it, understand how I can provide something that's even more valuable. What do people want? Do they just want to get better? No. Sometimes they want, a friendship group. I think that's a lot of what coaching is, creating a friendship group for people, and in doing that, you then trick them into coming to the gym, which is job number one, which is get someone to the gym 4 days a week for 10 years. And then you can use your trickery on them and try and get them strong, like You got to work on the business.
Well, it keeps the process so fun, and it keeps the process fun because it's a different challenge. And it keeps it fun because you're actually directly impacting people's lives, which I think is important too. So it's not just, hey, I wrote this program by myself and it took me a couple hours and like, go do that. But it's like, hey, while you're doing your snatches, like in between sets, like, have you been outside of the gym? Tell me something that's, today that happened that you felt was a positive. That was really productive. What wasn't productive? Why wasn't it? What are you going to do about that stuff? So again, I always come back to, I see what I've learned and how I've developed through lifting weights, and the amount of transformation that comes from that is so large. Like, there's so much change. It's like, how can I share that with people? And it doesn't start with the sets and the reps. It starts with the conversation before and after training and everything in between. And to me, like, that's what makes it such a rich experience too, instead of just, I love watching people lift weights, but I love watching people lift weights because they're people lifting weights, right? It's not, I just like weightlifting or watching someone, like watching the weights being lifted. Like, I would like watching people lift weights, athletes lift weights. And then you reduce that down. It's, well, people are individuals. Who's the individual? They have a name, they have a backstory, they have a life, so that's where the richness comes from. That's why remote coaching is actually kind of tough. So
100%.
Yeah, it's because you don't get that same richness.
No.
And so you have to be very proactive to seek it out. So like, I think Brian Williams does a really good job of like keeping his finger on the pulse. Colin Stark, he does a really good job of that. But
as in, they do a good job as athletes for you in being in contact with you.
Yeah, and making it feel personable.
Talking about their life.
Here's who I am. Yeah, here's who you are. And I like you for who you are, and you like me for who I am. It's not just that, like, oh, I snatched a PR. Can you post that around? But it's like, this awesome person did this really awesome thing. Let's make them do more awesome
I can have a
things.
podcast with someone who knows as much as you about programming, but it won't be as good because there isn't a relationship there. And like you said, I mean, why do you like coaching people? It's because they're humans.
Right.
And, as a thought experiment, you've got one gym and inside it are people. And then in another gym, you have robots. And the robots will respond to the stimulus just as you could predict, and you can program them to do and get better. But they'll also, they'll get worse if you overwork them, or you could teach them a bad technical model, but they're just going to respond exactly how you think. That wouldn't be that fun. It would be useful to run like tests with them, but only so you can put it on the people. Because it's the unpredictability and the variability and the different lifestyles of the people that makes the whole thing interesting. And the controlling nature, which often is a great way to create the best weightlifters. You see, a lot of the ex-Soviet countries had that almost robotic, controllable, remove the variable type systems, but it's probably not as fun. But just like, you could do the tests on the robots to put on the people, we can look at all the Soviet research, which is basically the tests on the robots, or as close to it as we can get, take that away and then try and apply it to the people. And we can apply it to some, degree of success, but not totally, because your athletes aren't Soviets and they weren't robots. But
what an awesome like fiction story that would be.
That would be fun. Yeah,
that'd be sick. Somehow it's revealed at the end that you're just training an army of robots. That'd be cool. I think, kind of on top of this, the importance of recognizing like everything besides the sets and reps. I think too, I've had a few conversations recently, and I've tried to share that with people who have wanted to come on. They're like, hey, considering kind of working with you, we're looking for a coach, and here are my goals. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. And then here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for someone who wants to, so it's not like an interview per se. And it's not, there's just more of a filter. And
that's what works for you as well. You're not just going to take anyone on. And also what people come in, they go, I want to lift more. It's like, that's like, that doesn't separate you from any other weightlifter. Like, no weightlifter comes in going, I want to stick with these numbers. It's like, I know you want to lift more. Why do you want to lift more? Like, what are your goals in life? Like, is that compatible with me and what I love about my life, or where I want my life to go? There has to be way more of a, and you know what? Athletes respect that. I think,
Right.
a lot.
Oh
like,
yeah.
And so do customers. When you say things like, I've seen it before where coaches will say, who are trying to get grow an online team, they'll say, individual personalization, 24/7 WhatsApp contact. And it's like, well, that's not true. And also it shows that your time is just cheap and free. You don't have a real value on what it means per minute to be with you, or per hour. Whereas if you say 1 by 30-minute phone call every week, booked in by Saturday, and then we have it in the next week, suddenly people go, okay, that is like quantifiable. This person has like set periods of time. I respect that period of time. I'm going to have a 30-minute phone call with him about or her about my programming. Like that suddenly means something. And so I think people try to offer too much. It's like, oh, the programming for all ages, all genders, all levels, at 24/7 access to me via WhatsApp. It's like, gosh, you're kind of like CrossFit. You're pretty shit at everything, but you do everything.
Right.
Whereas the person who goes, I'm going to coach 20 people. I'm going to give 1 hour of phone call a week to talking about their programming. And then I'm going to program for them outside of that. It's like, yeah, those are the people who, and I'm going to coach that. I want these sorts of people who have achieved this total, or they have this goal.
Right.
Like by narrowing it down a little bit, suddenly someone who fits that goal is like, oh, I need that coach because that person specifically coaches people like me, and they want to coach someone exactly like me. I need to let that coach know that I exist, rather than just you find a coach who supposedly coaches everybody, and it's like, and has no interview process, and it's like, yeah, I just won't. And a lot of the good coaches, and you're now beginning to do this, Justin does this, Dave does this, and I know that other coaches do this. It's just those are the ones who've said it publicly on the podcast before. They have an interview process, and they let their athletes help make the decision. It's not like I want to join Willpower or I want to join Cal Strength, so I'm just going to join. Obviously, you can do the online program for Cal Strength, but that doesn't really mean anything. But like to join the gym, it's like, oh, you want to join? Okay, well, maybe you will join, maybe you won't, but you don't just get to join. Like you only get to join if you fit what we want. And like you've got to start having that slightly more niche offering, and it's happening more and more in, even like in the general world. Like you look at clothing, it's like no one buys like the cheap t-shirt from H&M anymore, or maybe they do, TK Maxx, TJ Maxx. It's like you go to like that one influencer who you love, that Steffi Cohen person, like someone like her who like, I'm obsessed with her and her values, and she creates this one small type of product range, and I'm going to only go there.
Right.
And like everything is getting a little bit more separated into specifics, and I think that is the way to go if you're going to be a coach or a business owner, or like if we started doing powerlifting and strongman, it would be awful. You gotta stick to something and be true to it, and just be like, that's me. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to fill up that room, but I'm not going outside of the room necessarily, and there's a lot to do in the room.
Well, and part of that, again, it comes back to, if you have a certain way you want to operate and you do that, people pick up on it. And then the people who can reflect that and drive with it will help filter out people who don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where you're at too. I imagine if you went to Cal Strength, imagine you got in and you were, you got through the interview process or whatever it was. And then you're like in that room and you just like didn't fit, and you couldn't really talk to anyone. And you kind of really didn't like the feel of the environment and the way people handled themselves. And you'd kind of just see your way out. And I think that's that's a constructive environment to have. Yeah. It's almost like you want the environment to be a filter too. So you don't have to always do every single thing or always be on every single thing. It's like, okay, yeah, you can sign up and you can be a part of the team and you show up, and it's like, yeah, you just don't really fit in. They're like, yeah, I'm probably going to cancel or stop training or whatever it is.
People love rules and structure. People don't like anarchy, as much as people always want absolute freedom and no borders and no structure and no I should have said borders because that makes it sound like I'm being political. Just like borders between ideas or literally anything. Like, but you do need some of it, because you need to know, like,
Right.
what is the framework in which we're acting, like what's allowed, like what do people expect, and
Right.
that's so useful. But when there's nothing, like when you leave a kid and the parents don't discipline them, the kid gets angry, naughty, doesn't have
Right.
any friends. When you grow up with a kid, you're like between 5 and 7, you go outside, like you can play whatever you want, but you got to stay in the garden or something.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
and there is one rule: you're not allowed to call your sibling an idiot, and you're not allowed to smack him in the face.
Right.
If you want to fight, you can fight. You know, if you want to do this, you do this. But like giving them rules, it's like then that kid grows up and is, it's a good kid.
Yeah. Well, and I think when people come in, they develop. So like another thing I've done when I talk to people is, one, I convey an idea of what I want to do, how I do it. I also tell them explicitly, like, hey, this is what you're getting. It's not sugar coated. Like, you're getting probably a surplus of penis jokes. Sorry,
Yeah.
internet. Just broke the internet, broke the podcast.
Well, Josh, you know, everybody on this, well, maybe not on this podcast, everyone on the Morning Brew knows that you're still on rung number 1 of the ladder of humor, which is butt, fart, and penis jokes.
Well, I just stick it in where I can.
Oh God.
Because it fits. That's my humor, right? And I like to make that evident to people. It's like, this is what you're getting. So if you don't like it, like, I'm sorry.
That's what she said. This is what you're getting,
and that's why
if
we're
you don't
very,
like it.
that's why we're very compatible, Seb. But I try to, my biggest thing is making sure people know that. And it's like, and I'm sure Justin feels the same way. He's like, this is who I am. Dave's the same way. Like, this is who I am. I mean, The Godfather kind of gives that idea and that image. But like, this is what we are. And we're not going to change that for you. We're not going to change it for one person, because that'd be like Glenn changing his entire training philosophy because one person didn't respond. It's like, well, it probably just wasn't a good fit. And your physiology didn't line up. Your mechanics didn't line up. Now, if everyone doesn't fit, that's the problem. So seeing that, like, okay, we've developed something, it's pretty good. We're not going to change it for you, but we'll change it for everyone else, right? We'll change it for the team. We'll adapt it to the team. And that's why I've been, I try to have conversations with people who are on the team. Danny competed recently. We had like a debrief afterwards, the day after, and we've kind of spoken about it since. Like, hey, what went well, what didn't, what do we want to change, how are we going to change that? We're always thinking a little bit ahead, because we're reflecting on what happened. So we're thinking in the past, and then in order so we can think kind of through the future. And I think, you start getting people involved like that, and then everyone's thinking about that stuff, and everyone's trying to help the development. And it's like you said, okay, you have someone responsible, but it's someone responsible for 4 other people. And it's not like, oh, you didn't do it, you're going to get reprimanded. It's like, okay, how can we facilitate a better process? How can we make a better environment? Like, can we put up more weightlifting content so that you're more inspired? Like, put up more shit on the wall, so that when you see Puros every morning, you want to achieve greatness, because that's what he did. Like, how do we do that? And that's where you come in, right? That's where the big boss comes in and thinks through that stuff.
Absolutely. So let's go rounding all the way back to how it started then. 2022. A lot happened to you in 2021. You moved into a proper gym. You became the head weightlifting coach of the gym. You got very sick and went to hospital. You got back out. You started training again. You improved your system for online programming with your spreadsheets and all of that sort of thing.
Right.
What's 2022? Are there goals? Are there things that you would quite like to have achieved by the end? Whether that's, I want to have had this many more athletes, or I want to get these 3 athletes that I coach to nationals, or do you just want to be happier and more present? Like, what are the metrics?
So to be fair, I coach at the club. I'm not the head coach.
Coach at the weightlifting, I guess.
Coach at Clintonville. My thing is to always refine the process. I think that's what's always ever evolving. So the way I present it, the way I process it, and the way I think through it, and then execute it. So like those things. And so I'm always kind of looking at like, I heard a really good quote, and it was, if you measure an output and you don't use it, don't measure the output. So if there's something you're measuring and you're not using it, get rid of it, right? Because you're just adding like you're cluttering up the space. You're cluttering up your mental space, and you're cluttering up the physical space. And like at some point you can go back to it. So like this concept of like a K value where you're taking like intensity, and then you're looking at it compared to the competition total, and then you're thinking like, okay, how does this relate, and how does this guide my programming? It's like, okay, well, it hasn't. Don't measure it. Like you don't need it. So I'm trying
when you're trying to measure everything on an Excel spreadsheet, and it's like, I've been measuring volume over 80% for ages, but it's never impacted my decision making.
Exactly.
So don't measure it. Stop.
Yeah. Stop. Or just like take a break and think about what else could you do that's maybe different, or could you measure something else? Maybe there's something more sensitive. So I'm just refining the process, developing a framework and a system with which I can better like expedite all of these things so that I can focus more on the coaching, right? So it's like, okay, we've got you set up. I kind of know where we're going. I've got things listed out. This is going to work, given the executions, right? And then now it's my job to help you perform to your best ability every single day, every single session. How do I make that happen? Technical stuff, again, it's just getting a system in place so I can better communicate it. It's like, I know how to teach the technique. I know what good technique is. I know all that stuff, but it's how can I give that to someone else if they need it? You know, how can I break it out and say, well, this is the process. These are the steps. This is what we do. And you constrain yourself sometimes when you do that because it's a bit more rigid, but it's useful. So what I'm looking at for 2022 is, you know, I've taken on some new lifters and might be having a few more later, but they're pretty good. One girl's actually national level, and you know, some really good people that join the team. So it's just helping them become better to reach their goals. And as always, it's to get the most out of what we're doing. And that's like a long-term process. So for me, it's just to constantly improve what I'm doing so we can provide a better service, which will improve what they're doing, which facilitates itself. I feel like I'm in the process of that. So it's just to do more of it and to continue to do it. But I like your idea of kind of reflecting on timelines. I think that seems insightful.
I can send you the sheet it's a very simple A4 sheet.
That
you can look at and just fill things in. And it's helpful. I mean, I think what you and I have, obviously, we started off very much, we started weightlifting at the same time, basically, like 2013, 14 type, era. We both got more obsessed than I've met anyone else be personally, other than Glenn. Still not found someone who's actually as obsessed as you or I are, as much as people might think they are. I disagree. And then we followed similar paths. We both snatched 100 pretty quick. We both then, kept pushing and pushing, have had a slew of injuries that have then sent us in slight different directions, from both thinking we're going to be national champions to you saying, well, I'm going to impact the sport by being the best coach I can be. And I said, I'm going to impact the sport by bringing the sport closer to all of the people who are interested in learning about it. And we have different maybe scales of goals. Like, I don't think if you have the goal of, I want a 2,000 person online team. Maybe you don't even have the goal of, I want 5 gyms called philosophical weightlifting gyms that I franchise out around the world. I'm maybe a little bit more big scale, but we have this like desire, this love of weightlifting that is, I don't know. I mean, can I try that exercise on you where I just keep asking why? Until we reach the bottom. All right. Why do you love weightlifting?
So I think this is a great exercise, but I kind of explained it at the start of the show a little bit, in that ultimately it's to help people, right? So like, I love weightlifting.
Okay, well, let me ask that. Why do you like to help people? Makes you feel good?
Because of
stops you crying at night?
So I'm always going to cry, sadly. No, I think a lot of it comes down to, what did I feel like I didn't have that I developed? How do I help people develop that?
That's, I know, and the problem is, the more you keep asking why, you get to something that you don't talk about much, It's not easy to talk about, but often it comes down to like, I didn't get this, and therefore that's what I want.
Right.
You know, and like that's where you're sort of coming from, and that's like maybe you didn't feel like you had that help, and so that's just become an enormous thing for you. Is that that's what I want to put into the world.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about what you've done and what I'm trying to do is that it's like there are people who have done it.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who've done it well, and there are people who've developed systems of doing it and communicating those systems. But like you pretty much developed Weightlifting House kind of like just so randomly and so just it's like
without
didn't make
anything
sense.
to copy, at least.
Yeah, exactly. It was just like out of nowhere, and then over time just figuring things out piece by piece.
Yeah.
And like it allowed you to then refine everything. But you started with like what seemed like kind of like a jumbled approach.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, okay, well maybe we'll get our clothing from here, and maybe we'll do this from here, and it's like, okay, that's not working. Like we need a better system, and then it's just refining.
I still remember the first iteration of the website where I would comb through Instagram, find the most interesting lifts, repost them to my website, and write about them. And then I put that on weightlifting forums, and I was like, what do you guys think? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do news. And the comments were like, this is dumb. You're an idiot. Yeah. Like, why would anybody read this? A couple of helpful ones. Yeah. But basically it was like, this is not an idea that can ever work. Right. And you are right. Like there's not a good, I certainly wouldn't recommend people do it like that. Because like who brings out a t-shirt and then the second product is a barbell? When you have a podcast that reaches like 1,500 people at the time. It's like, oh yeah, great market you got there. And then you know what I mean? Like it doesn't particularly work that well, but you develop such extreme brand loyalty and niche, like from the jump, right? I remember as soon as you said that, my thought was, I want a Weightlifting House barbell. Like it didn't cross my mind, the price, the convenience, the quality did, but it's like, you said a bunch of stuff like 210,000, you said a bunch of shit. And to me, that was meaningless, but it's like, okay, it's Weightlifting House branded. Yeah. And I think initially and still now, just getting that buy-in was huge. And I'd buy anything from Weightlifting House just because you were selling it. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's an odd one. I do like, I was talking to Owen about this yesterday from Seeker, you know, because he was, before he started Seeker, he, you know, was just working a 9-to-5 job that he hated. Right. And he just dreamt about doing something like he's doing now, where he just, you know, reads research and talks weightlifting and, you know, sells programming. And like, I just remember the hours of conversations that I'd have with you, where, do you remember that co-working space I used to go to? I'd go in there on a Sunday when there'd be no one there, and I'd unlock, I'd have this massive place to myself, and I just put you on the laptop, and we wouldn't even record a podcast. We would just talk for 2.5, 3 hours. Yeah. And there was so much conversation of like, for you, I remember there was a lot of, I just want to have a team, man. Yeah. I just want to have athletes, you know, I want to have a place. And for me, it was like, I want to be able to create content full time and sell products to make that happen. Right. But there was always a level of, that can't really happen. I can't really grow to the point where I could employ people. Or you were like, I just don't think I can ever leave this gym and get a job doing this and get paid to do it. And then it's been those 5 years since I flew to Kansas, you know, 4 since you and I started talking. And like, you know, I look what I'm doing now, and I still have that same feeling of, there's so much to do. God, I barely feel like I've started, and you probably feel that too. Yeah, but you're in the thick of it. But yeah, and if you could show yourself now to yourself 4 years ago, you would fucking probably cry. Yeah. You know what I mean? You'd be like, oh my God, I'm doing it. I'm doing that thing that I want to do. I'm doing the coaching. I've got the athletes. I enjoy coaching them. And it's so easy in the moment to think about, but I still got this and that and that. It's like, no, just scrap that. Just forget that right now. Like, you know, you're doing it. Well, and I think, again, an important point, and it comes back to what I said about Weightlifting House initially, where there's like, when you're doing it yourself, there's a lot of variability. Yeah. And what I've had to develop over time is, one, to be a lot more flexible with how I change my approach, but it's also, you have to be a lot more open to
like the transactional nature of it. And kind of talking to Justin, he talked about like he exists on one timeline, right? It's like birth to death. That's his timeline. And then people kind of like plop themselves on that timeline. They kind of come and go.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to get so like, I used to feel so personally attacked when people would like, hey, I want to get coached, and then they leave.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that's I felt like it was kind of like offensive almost.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of like rainwater on like a flower petal or something. It just kind of like slides off, and it maybe sticks initially a little bit. So it's like, those are things that looking back, I wish I would have realized, like, you'll kind of develop this with time. Mm-hmm. Like some things you can like artificially manufacture. You can read more, you can understand more, you can do more work in the moment. You can put more time towards something, and you can expedite the improvement. But like skills like that, you just have to experience it and then think about like, okay, well, why do I feel like this? How can I improve it next time? It's just slow growing. And I think
that, I like that.
So I think our initial chat, when we talked about our goals and what we wanted to do, that the tough thing is you can't see how you'll develop as a person. You can only see how everything around you will develop. And I think just knowing like, hey, my skills and my abilities, my personality, like that stuff will develop too. Just as my coaching is going to develop, just as the products, the application of the information, the execution of it, that stuff will change. So will how I do every single thing that I do. That's like the most important thing to take away from this conversation, is like, you'll grow with the process. So where you are now is not where you're going to be. And that's a good thing. Right.
Mm-hmm. I like that a lot. Interesting, this idea of like, you're on a timeline, and it's almost like, your timeline is like a long toothpick, and you drop 100 of them, and some of them are going to cross.
Right.
They're just in your life, and they're out of it. And you don't have to be sad when they're out of it. Like, they're just on theirs. Like, for all they know, you just cross theirs. But then also there'll be some toothpicks that, roll along and they're just touching and they're aligned. It's like, I look at someone like Charlotte, and like, we've just got two toothpicks that are just touching start to finish.
Yeah.
Or like, and then there are certain people who you think, well, you're just going to be in my life for quite a long period of time. Yeah. Probably you're one of those people with me. I mean, who knows? Maybe like we never talk again, but probably that's not true. And probably we're going to go through careers in weightlifting for decades, referring to each other back and forth, talking about various things, having contact. And like, there are just going to be some people who you have that with, and certain who you don't. Some people are in your life for 2 years, a month, others for 10 years, others for, your life, basically.
The thing I don't like about social media is, and it's not like social media, but like the way we're so connected, is that you can't get clean breaks. And it's like unless you like make it happen, right? But you're like always exposed to everyone, especially in weightlifting, where it's like relatively tight knit.
It's like a sludge of like, from when you separate from someone, there's like this remaining trail that doesn't disappear when they disappear.
I almost wish it were cleaner, and that it's like, hey, it's okay, but let's just make it clean, right? Let's not have this like residual effect. And that's kind of just like social media in general. Like, you feel like you're obligated to be connected with everyone because you can be connected with everyone, instead of saying, I don't care what you're doing, I care about what you're doing or like what you're doing, so I'm just not going to include myself in that. But then you start to like wonder, well, how do they feel? Is that going to get around to other people? And it becomes like this really interconnected transaction, instead of just like, hello, goodbye.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. All right. Maybe we should wrap this bad boy up.
Yeah, maybe we should.
This was fun. Something that I'd like to, and I was thinking this is, I think part of the reason why, what makes some of what we've done interesting or a little bit more unique, is the fact that it has all been documented.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I sort of, I'm nervous to do it because I think I might cringe a little bit. Yeah. But I would like to go back and listen to me and you on our first few podcasts together.
Yeah.
Like, as hyper passionate as you could be about weightlifting, but was not a, with nothing, absolutely not an athlete to our name.
Yeah.
Just a pile of books, the dwarf stuff that we were trying to, read through.
I would, and like you said, you were at like some shared space where you would work. I was working at the time, and I'd be like at work and like open up the laptop, go to a confined space where no one was there, and then like pop on for a podcast.
Yeah.
And that, I think that was like, it was so random and so kind of shooting from the hip. It's part of what I loved about it, but
maybe I should upload just to the main podcast.
oh my
like
gosh,
a 2017 episode of Seven Josh.
Oh,
Like the
oh,
one,
dude.
what I like to listen to is the one that was called Hypertrophy and Deep Life Talks.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
That one blew up for some reason, did
Yeah.
really well. And there were probably I imagine there are some topics that we covered then that we just covered now.
Yep.
And I'd like to hear how our thought processes have changed or haven't changed.
Right.
I think any change or lack thereof is notable and interesting, at least to me.
Yeah,
because
I think so.
It's us. Other people might not care at all about our development, but like I would quite like to go back and listen to that at some point. I think it'd be interesting.
Well, and you get so consumed in the moment that it's hard to pick up on change.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I've always kind of been this way with like some smoothing of the rougher edges, but and then I would go back and listen. I think I had episodes from 2015 on YouTube that are private, and I'll listen to those, and I sound notably different.
Yeah. Like lack of confidence or like
overconfidence.
Yeah.
No, it was I sounded like weightlifting talk, like a thrift store version of weightlifting talk.
Dude,
but I also didn't enunciate super well. And I think just talking on air a lot, being recorded a lot, you try to sound clear and crisp and understandable. I sounded like I was someone pulled me off the street. They said, do your best John North impression and record it for 45 minutes. That's what it was.
It's such a similar thing because we were just so influenced by those early episodes. I mean, like the first, oh my God, the first audio version of the news show. I remember doing it, and it was like a new thing that had never been done in the weightlifting world. And I think we got like 500 listens, which is decent for an episode 1 of a new type of thing. And I was so pleased, and I played it to Charlotte. She's like, "What's wrong with your voice?" I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Why do you sound so posh?" Like so, like over, you know what I mean? Like, you've not understood the word posh in the past, but hopefully you get it now. Like affluent and like, why do you sound so wealthy and all these sorts of things? I was like, I realized like I must have just been so nervous that that's how it came out. And it's so weird listening back to it. And then watching the first video version of it that I did is horrific. It is like so bad I might have to take it down.
Oh yeah.
You're just looking at like, I can't believe people watched that. And that took like, how could I have uploaded that version of myself? So bad. But you know, you only know that if you've documented it and you can go back and look. But like in so many jobs and walks of life, moments aren't documented particularly well. Like if you have a regular job, you can't go back and be like, how good was I at this job in 2017? You don't really know other than the fact you've been promoted. So having that sort of that record, that breadcrumb trail to look back on, it's like, wow, things were bad, but wow, like I've improved. But what we're doing now, we're going to look back on and cringe at as well in 4 years and be like, I can't believe we did that episode. I can't believe we just spoke about values and thought we knew what our values were. How cringe.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a very vulnerable space to be in. Actually, a post Kate and I put up resonated a lot. And she mentioned
which post?
Kind of like she mentioned growing up as an athlete on Instagram. And she's like, yeah, you guys have watched me kind of from day one grow up and develop. Yeah. And I was like, it's kind of the same way for like my coaching. It's kind of this, I mean, it's the exact same way for Weightlifting House. Yeah. But like people have watched us develop from kind of like start to present. And that's fine. The problem is that, again, we're still in the process of developing. So you either see it as like an end, or you see it as, oh, look at all, you can see like, look at all the growth, look at all the mistakes, look at where they're at. This is where they're going to be. When we were bringing on guests onto Weightlifting House to chat, we would get 10 years after they started, we would get like, essentially where we're going to be at some point in 5 years. Where we are now. Dave Spitz wasn't doing podcasts in 2012. He wasn't doing podcasts in 2009 when he started American Weightlifting. He's doing podcasts in 2018, 2019 when he's developed or developing an Olympian.
Yeah.
So you're getting Dave Spitz at his best and at his peak as of now.
Yeah.
I think it creates like this weird dynamic where
Mhm.
like, okay, some people have gotten like everything documented, for better or for worse. Some people are just kind of come in and they're like, they seem like they've got it all figured out, but like that process happens for everyone. Like you can't escape the process.
No. Yeah, I get fewer and fewer, but I still get a bit like fewer and fewer comments that are like, who are you? And like, why are you the news? Like, why are you the authority? Like, why do you think you can just put out this stuff? And it's like, there was more of it at the start. And in some ways, I get just as much now because it reaches more new people.
Right.
But like, the more you do it, the more people are like, oh, it's because that's what he does.
Yeah.
And I never have a great answer to it. It's like, I don't know, like no one else is doing it.
Yeah.
You don't have to listen. Like, it's not like the IWF has said, this is our guy. I'm just doing it as just a person. I'm putting it up online. No one else to tune in. Like, but yeah, you're right. Like, we get documented. Well, we've been documented from being utter idiots along the way. But like now, maybe you still get the comments like, why are you the person doing that? It's like, I don't know. I just like, you can give it a go if you want to. It doesn't have to be. I'm not the only one.
Right. That's a great point. Like, cause I probably get that from time to time. I feel like that from time to time. It's like, okay, I'm involved with this like project. Why am I involved with this? So for example, I have a call at 9:30 and it's a research, it's like a study looking at deloads, and they're interviewing coaches and athletes who have been in the sport for like over 5 years or something like that. And Eric Helms included me in a group chat on Instagram. I was like, hey, we're doing this study. We need to interview people. Would you guys be interested? And it's like, why am I in this? Why am I in this group? There's no reason I should be in this.
Yeah.
What am I going to say? I don't belong here. Don't include me. Thanks. I'm just going to take the opportunity.
Yeah.
And anyone who would say like, well, why were you involved? It's like, okay, well, you be involved. Oh, you didn't build the relationships or the connections. You didn't spend enough time to like, okay, so there's a discrepancy here.
Yeah.
So it's easy from the outside in to say like, oh, anyone can do that, or why are you doing that? But it doesn't matter. Do
you get any level of imposter syndrome being
all
like
the
a coach
time.
at people? Do you really?
Oh yeah. Well, and it's just because it's not because I don't think I can do a good job. It's because I know I could do a better job.
Right.
So a lot of it isn't. I have to remind. I was literally just like, I was my own hype man yesterday. I was walking to my car, and I brought on someone new, and I was like, okay, when you get a new athlete, you're getting a lot of baggage. It's like, I've got these problems. I got these problems. This has worked well. This hasn't worked well. Here's my personality. Here's my life circumstances. And it's like, okay, this is a lot to consider. Can we make you better? Can we help you realize your potential? And I had to remind myself, I'm like, you've gotten people strong. Strong. It's not a fluke. This doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
And it's hard it's easy to convince yourself that it just happens. It's like, oh, this person would have gotten strong regardless. You actually don't know that. And you're like creating this counterfactual world that doesn't exist, and saying, okay, if I were in that world and someone else were coach them, they'd get the same results. Right. You can't do that. And you can't do that to yourself. You just shoot your confidence. So I have to remind myself, you've been here before, you've done it before, you can do it again.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm existing 90% of my day, honestly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's tough, dude. I feel like the more you do it, hopefully the less.
Oh, it's definitely
better
to do
it.
Yeah. But
yeah, that sucks. You have to deal with that.
I mean, it keeps you sharp. Do you remember back when we first started recording, I was like, I love this podcast, the Weightlifting House podcast, because the pressure to know what I'm talking about is so great.
Yeah.
I have to like study, and I have to be, knowledgeable about this stuff. I can't just fly by the seat of my pants and say, something, you want to get stronger, so you need to like bench press and do sets of 10. And it's like, okay, that's, I could say that, but like, there's nothing behind it.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that now when I make a claim or say something, if you really try to make me explain every single aspect of it, I could, even if it's like unnecessary.
Well, that's where the depth comes in. Like back to what we're talking about, Glenn's programming. a new coach could potentially write the same week one that Glenn would write.
Right.
But there's depth to Glenn's. Or like, insert famous, progressive modern day artist does something. And it's like, but anyone could have done that. It's like, but they didn't. And even if they did, like, they haven't done all the other things that makes that thing interesting and rich and
it makes it like, it gives it purpose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like a Jackson Pollock, like, obviously, like, there's probably way more that goes into it than I'm aware of, but like you look and you go, like, could a few people do that? It's like, maybe they could, but they didn't. They weren't the first. And also we have this rich history of 30 years of looking at his art change, to look at that and go, that's cool.
So
that means something.
It's the same reason why people don't pay for cover bands. They pay for the actual band.
Yeah.
So like, anyone can play the music.
Yeah.
But not everyone can play the music.
Yeah,
right?
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's the authentic side of it. Josh, you were Gibson, people scientist. Tell people where they can follow you.
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Josh_Phil WL. You can follow me on YouTube at Philosophical Weightlifting. You can follow the gym, the club at Clintonville Barbell, and you'll kind of find every other link you need when you're there. So
yeah, it's peanut butter and jelly, isn't it? That's me and you.
It is, exactly.
It just is so easy. I mean, obviously we podcast basically every week on the Morning Brew on Patreon, right. But even so, I haven't finished recording all the episodes for this series, but like, most enjoyable episode. It's always been
this was awesome
for me. It's always been the easiest, funnest episodes that we do together.
Yeah,
but we just can't always do them. But
no, it wouldn't be a special. I remember when we started, you were like, yeah, let's talk about, I don't remember what you said, to be honest. You brought up some topics and we're like, well, kind of just shoot from the hip. And then it's like,
I didn't have any topics.
How was 2021? And then it's like, okay, hour and 45-minute podcast.
Well, my topic was, what did I have written down on my phone? I wrote, Josh, biggest programming changes, biggest changes we've noticed in the sport, brackets, fans, athletes, coaches. And then I also wrote down an engaging new idea for competition. And so we're going to come up with how another way. And then, it's like, you were just instantly like, well, what did you learn over the last year? That was the only question that probably really got asked, and then it was just a free flow conversation.
Yeah. What are we going to say? Oh, allow straps in competition. That would make it exciting.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to make all the difference. Yeah, it's crazy. Anyway, guys, go follow Josh and follow all other things Weightlifting House. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you all on another episode of the Weightlifting House podcast.